May 24, 1844. Forget Silicon Valley. Forget sterile labs and venture capital. Everything you're holding in your hand, every text you send, every piece of breaking news you scroll past, it all started here. In the old Supreme Court chamber, under the U.S. Capitol. A room so cold you can see your breath hanging like a ghost in the lamplight. It smells of brass, like a penny held too long in a nervous fist, and the sharp, vinegar bite of acid from a row of primitive batteries lining the wall. This revolution wasn't born from a desire for convenience. It was born from grief. Years earlier, the man at the center of this room, Samuel Morse, was a painter, away from home, working on a portrait. His wife fell gravely ill and died. A letter was sent by horseback, but it moved at the speed of muscle and mud. By the time Morse got the news and raced home, she had already been buried. The slowness of the world had robbed him of a final goodbye. And in that grief, an obsession was forged, to find a way for a message to travel faster than tragedy. Now, all these years later, his obsession sits on a simple wooden table. A single brass key, wired to a coil, a spring, and those acid jars. Morse, a man haunted by that memory, steadies his hand in Washington. 40 miles away, his partner Alfred Vail waits in a grimy Baltimore train depot, his eyes fixed on a thin strip of paper. Between them, a single, unproven iron wire stretches across the countryside. For years, this idea has been a joke. A fantasy. They've been called lunatics. But today, it will either work, or it will be their final, public humiliation. A young woman named Annie Ellsworth has chosen the first official words, a verse from the Bible, "What hath God wrought?" Today, we perform the autopsy on that single moment. Because when Morse finally touched that key, he didn't just send a message. He fired a starter pistol for the modern world. So tell me, if this little brass key is a trigger, what exactly did it kill? And more importantly, how is it that this same exact device is still ticking, right now, inside your pocket? To understand how this changed everything, you have to feel the machine itself. Touch that key in your mind. Feel the cold, knurled knob under your fingertip, the slight give of the lever. Feel the tension in that little steel spring, a spring that promises every press will eventually return to silence. Now, press down. A circuit closes. A whisper of electric current, born in those acid jars, slides down that 40-mile copper wire faster than a horse can run, faster than a train can steam. In Baltimore, that current hits an electromagnet, just a humble iron core wrapped in wire. The iron wakes up, instantly magnetized, and yanks a tiny metal arm towards it with a sharp click. That arm, called an armature, presses a stylus into a moving strip of paper, making a dent. Let go of the key, the current dies, the magnet sleeps, and the spring pulls the arm back. Clack. A click becomes a mark. A mark becomes a letter. A series of letters becomes a word, spelled out in a language of clicks and silences. This was a symphony of simple physics. But every piece had to be perfect. The copper wire, drawn fine as a human hair, had to be insulated, wrapped meticulously in silk and varnish to keep the precious current from leaking out in the damp earth. The batteries themselves were a quiet revolution. Before the Daniel cell, you had voltaic piles, which were erratic, surging and dying like a flickering candle. The Daniel cells, by contrast, were steady, gentlemanly. They produced a stable current you could actually rely on for hours. This was the steady heartbeat the system needed. And then there was the code. Morse and Vail's true genius. They didn't just assign random patterns. They were some of the first information theorists. They studied letter frequency in English texts, and gave the simplest codes to the most common letters. E is just one dot. T is just one dash. The complex, longer codes were for rare letters like J, Q, and Z. It was a masterclass in efficiency, a precursor to the data compression that runs our entire digital world. This was the secret, not one single miraculous invention, but a robust system. A protocol. A strict set of rules. The dots, the dashes, and just as important, the three distinct lengths of silence. The pause inside a letter, the pause between letters, and the pause between words. This meant you didn't just see the language on paper, you could hear it. An experienced operator could tell who was sending a message just by their hand or their fist, the unique rhythm of their sending style, like recognizing a friend's unique footfall coming up the stairs. The machine had a voice. And it was about to start talking to the entire world. That first message was like a single stitch, connecting two rooms. But once the needle was threaded, humanity went into a frenzy of sewing, trying to stitch the whole world together. Let's run the timeline, and feel just how violently the world shrank. 1844, Washington to Baltimore. 40 miles. The proof of concept. The first domino falls. Just 7 years later, 1851, a cable is laid between Dover, England and Calais, France. The sea, for millennia a barrier of weeks and months, learns to carry a whisper in seconds. An international conversation is born. Then, the big one. America. 1861, as the nation is tearing itself apart in the Civil War, Western Union does the impossible. It stitches the continent together, from the urban centers of the East Coast to the gold fields of California, with a single, hot thread of iron wire. And what happens next is a perfect, brutal illustration of technological disruption. For 18 glorious, legendary months, the Pony Express had been the fastest thing on Earth. Brave young riders, celebrated as heroes, racing horses to exhaustion to carry mail across the frontier in a record 10 days. The day the transcontinental telegraph was completed, October 24, 1861, the Pony Express was immediately obsolete. It didn't fade away. It didn't have a slow decline. It died instantly. It became a relic overnight. Not by a bullet, but by a dial tone. The message had finally become faster than the horse. Faster than anything human. But there was one last barrier. The final boss of geography. The Atlantic Ocean. An abyss, 3,000 miles wide and 2 miles deep. Dark, crushing, filled with unseen mountains and canyons, and utterly hostile to human technology. Laying a wire across the bottom of it seemed as insane as building a bridge to the moon. But insanity is just ambition that hasn't succeeded yet. And no one was more ambitious, more insane, than a man named Cyrus Field. Cyrus Field was not an engineer. He wasn't a scientist. He was a retired paper merchant who got this impossible idea stuck in his head. He was a force of nature, a salesman who could charm money out of the most skeptical pockets in New York and London. And he failed. Spectacularly. Over and over again. His first attempt in 1857 was a comedy of errors. The cable, being paid out from the back of the ship, was too heavy, the braking mechanism was too weak, and snap. 200 miles of priceless cable sank uselessly to the bottom of the ocean. Failure. They tried again. This time the cable snagged on the machinery and snapped again. Failure. They tried a third time, sailing 2 ships to the middle of the Atlantic to start from the center and work outwards. They were hit by a monster storm, a hurricane so violent it almost capsized the ships, leaving the crew battered and terrified. They had to cut the cable to survive. Utter, catastrophic failure. But Field was relentless. He raised more money. He tried a 4th time. And in 1858, unbelievably, it worked. They connected Ireland to Newfoundland. For a few delirious weeks, the world was electric. Queen Victoria and President Buchanan exchanged polite, ponderous messages. London learned of a peace treaty in China before its own ships had even left Asia. It felt like a new era of global harmony had dawned. And then, the signals grew faint. Garbled. And then, silence. The cable was dead. The ocean had won. The public turned on Field. He was a fraud, a swindler. The Atlantic cable was a hoax. His investors were ruined, and he was a pariah. Any sane man would have quit. But Cyrus Field was not sane. He was obsessed. For years, through the chaos of the American Civil War, he kept the dream alive. And he learned from his mistakes. The problem had been human ego. The project's chief electrician, Wildman Whitehouse, had tried to scream a message across the ocean with over 2,000 volts of power. He'd fried the cable's insulation, letting the Atlantic seep in. The solution came from the quiet genius of Lord Kelvin, who argued for a gentle whisper instead of a shout. His mirror galvanometer was so sensitive it could read a signal 1,000,000 times weaker. They also needed better insulation. This led to a gutta-percha rush, a frantic harvest of tree sap from Malaysia, the only natural plastic that could withstand the deep ocean pressure. In 1866, 8 years after his ruinous failure, Cyrus Field came back. This time, he had the largest ship in the world, the SS Great Eastern, an iron leviathan. Armed with Kelvin's gentle science, a thicker, more robust cable, and his own unbreakable will, he finally tamed the Atlantic. A durable, gutta-percha umbilical cord now permanently connected the old world and the new. The planet had grown a nervous system. And it was all thanks to a man who simply refused to take no for an answer. The moment that permanent connection was made, the very rules of life began to change. The world started to move at the speed of the wire. Power consolidated. Companies like Western Union hardened from simple arteries into a single, beating heart, a near monopoly that controlled the flow of all information. In 1846, newspapers, realizing they couldn't afford to compete for telegraph access, banded together to form the Associated Press. A co-op designed to pool costs and share access to this new fire hose of news. They became one of the first great gatekeepers of information, deciding which stories the nation would hear. Financial traders weaponized time itself. Before, a price for cotton in London took a 10-day sea voyage to reach New York. Now, it arrived in minutes. This created a new kind of magic, arbitrage. Imagine, you're a trader in New York. You get a telegram that the price of wheat just spiked in London due to a bad harvest report. You can instantly buy up American wheat at the old, lower price, knowing that in minutes, when the news spreads, its value will skyrocket. You aren't making a fortune on goods, but on pure information asymmetry. The market was no longer in one place, it was everywhere the wire touched, all at once. And then there was crime. Before the wire, a criminal's greatest ally was a head start. If a man committed a murder in London, he could hop a train to the coast and be on a boat to America long before the police in the next town even knew a crime had happened. That ended in 1845. A man named John Tall poisoned his mistress and fled by train. But a witness saw him. Police rushed to the telegraph office. A description of the suspect was wired ahead to the next station. A Quaker, the message noted, describing his distinct clothes. When Tall calmly stepped off the train, thinking he was safe, a police officer was waiting on the platform to follow him. He was eventually arrested, tried, and hanged. It was the first time a criminal had been tracked and caught by electronic communication. The wire meant there was no longer a place to run. And then there was time itself. Imagine running a national train network when every single town has its own time. Noon in New York was a few minutes different from noon in Philadelphia. It was chaos, leading to constant delays and horrific head-on collisions because dispatchers were juggling dozens of different local times. It couldn't last. The telegraph made a solution possible. The railroads decided to impose order. So on November 18, 1883, something incredible happened. It was called the Day of Two Noons. At a prearranged moment, a signal was sent out over the telegraph wires to cities and towns all across North America. Acting on that signal, hundreds of cities stopped their clocks, and reset them to one of four new, standardized time zones. In some places, noon happened twice. In others, it didn't happen at all. People were confused, even angry. They said the railroads were trying to kill God's time. But they couldn't stop it. The world now needed to be synchronized. The wire didn't just move messages, it hardened seconds into law. For the first time in human history, the clock on the wall officially became more important than the sun in the sky. As the network grew, a new culture was born. Telegraph operators became the first netizens, the first digital community. They were living routers, human switches. They would sit in small offices, 24/7, listening to the chatter. A message would come in from one line, they'd write it down, then manually retransmit it down another line toward its destination. They held complex routing tables in their heads, passing information handoff by handoff, town to town across the globe. They were the original packet switchers. And because sending messages cost money by the word, they invented their own language. The first internet slang. Brevity was king. They compressed entire feelings into numbers to save bandwidth. 73 meant best regards. 88 meant love and kisses. They created a whole dictionary of abbreviations. They replaced the period with the word stop. Why? Because a stray dot could be easily missed in static, but you can't mistake the word stop. Clarity was paramount. For finance and diplomacy, huge codebooks were created. Entire phrases were converted into single, secret words. And in wartime, those ciphers became deadly serious. The wire became a front line. During the U.S. Civil War, the newly formed Military Telegraph Corps strung thousands of miles of temporary wire, connecting battlefields directly to Washington. And President Abraham Lincoln, he basically lived in the War Department telegraph office. He would haunt the room, his tall, gaunt frame stooped over the operator's shoulders, his fingertips blackened from handling the fresh ink on the paper tapes, reading battlefield dispatches the moment they arrived. He could ask a general a question and get an answer within the hour. Command and control became a live feedback loop. Cavalry raids were no longer just about attacking soldiers, they became cable-cutting missions. Eavesdropping on enemy lines became standard doctrine. Then, on the very first day of World War I in 1914, Britain did something decisive. It sent out ships to find and sever all of Germany's transatlantic cables. In one move, Germany was cut off from the Americas, isolated. It was a crippling blow dealt without firing a single shot on land. And it taught every nation the single most important rule of the networked age: whoever controls the wire, controls the world. So, as this network effect exploded, we can now look back and see a clear pattern. A pattern that repeats itself every single time we invent a new way for messages to outrun bodies. The same three forces that shaped the telegraph are shaping your life right now. 1. Power always migrates to the switches. The central nodes become gravitational centers. In the 19th century, that was the dispatchers, the editors at the Associated Press, the owners of Western Union. Today, it's the platform owners, the data centers, the algorithms that decide what you see. The power isn't in sending the message, it's in the ability to route, filter, and control the entire flow. 2. Language always compresses to fit the pipe. Feeling and etiquette must adapt to the new bandwidth. The telegraph operator's number codes were the first instance of this. Today, it's LOL, BRB, GIFs, memes, and emojis. It's the exact same human urge, to squeeze as much nuance and emotion as we can through a narrow, digital channel. 3. Time itself hardens. To coordinate strangers at a massive scale, you need a shared clock. The wire forced us onto standard time. Today, our lives are dictated by server timestamps, synchronized down to the nanosecond, that allow global finance, logistics, and your video calls to function. The tyranny of the synchronized second remains. Do you see it? The telegraph is not a quaint piece of history. It is the blueprint. It is the literal skeleton of our digital life, hidden just beneath the skin. Addresses, protocols, latency, routing, monopolies, network outages, encryption, surveillance, all of it started here. An operator in 1880 listening to static to diagnose a problem is the direct ancestor of a network engineer today listening to the pings of a server. The blueprint is identical. Only the speed has changed. And here's the human truth of it all. This machine solved an ancient, terrifying fear, the fear of being too far away. Too far from the people you love, too far from the prices that decide your fate. But in solving that fear, it installed a brand new, modern dread, the dread of being late, in a world that never, ever waits. Look around. You can still see the ghosts of gutta-percha and brass everywhere. That amazing fiber optic cable that brings you this video. 99% of all intercontinental internet traffic, your emails, your banking, your streams, still rides on undersea cables. They are the direct great-great-grandchildren of that first 1866 Atlantic cable. And when a fishing trawler accidentally snags a line off the coast of Singapore, your connection stutters for the exact same physical reason a Victorian-era telegram would vanish in a storm. The cable got cut. Those high-frequency traders on Wall Street using algorithms to chase profits in microseconds. They are the direct descendants of the 1860s arbitrageurs chasing minutes. It's the same game, just on a terrifyingly faster clock. The passionate debates we have about net neutrality are the ghost of Western Union's monopoly and its power to act as a gatekeeper. Even that little typing indicator, those 3 dots that appear when someone is messaging you, what is that? It's the ghost of a sounder's clicks. It's a digital echo of hearing the operator's hand on the key, letting you know that a message is on its way. The presence of the other person, made real by the machine. Speed is never neutral. It always redistributes power and redefines time. Every push we make for faster feeds, for shorter financial settlements, for lower latency gaming, is a quiet, invisible redrawing of the map of who wins, who loses, who decides, and who has to wait. We didn't just teach lightning how to speak, we taught it how to schedule us. How to price our goods. How to give us comfort and how to give us anxiety. The wire killed distance, but in exchange, it colonized our attention. So the next time you pull out your phone to send a message, take a closer look. Because buried deep beneath the glass of your touchscreen, you can still feel the faint pressure, and the cold, hard click, of an old brass key. This investigation is just one piece of the puzzle. The hidden architecture of our world is full of these forgotten stories, these crucial moments that set the stage for everything we do. If you want to see how another one of these ghost technologies built the world we live in, I've got another deep dive waiting for you right here on the end screen. Click it, and let's keep digging. Now, I have to ask you a question. Be honest. Do you feel more connected, or more isolated, because of the instant world this wire created? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Finally, every video on this channel is an autopsy of the past to understand our present. If that's your kind of investigation, make sure you hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a case file.